Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Femi. I'm the Regional Project Manager for West Yorkshire for the Hub. I also lead on things like hydrogen, so if you do want to have a discussion around that, you could see me just before the end of the event. So today I'll be talking on or introducing on local area energy planning at the district level. It's more of an introduction, then I'll be handing over to Lara, and Laura would actually do a deep dive on what we are doing at Calderdale at the moment. So just a quick introduction on how this started and where we are now. So the West Yorkshire Combined Authority declared a climate emergency in 2019, supported by our 5 local authority partners, and the basic idea was we wanted to see some advancement and some progress by 2030. One of the key requirements for us in achieving our emission targets for 2038 was to change how our energy system works in regards to energy generation, in regards to how flexible it was. And one of the key themes that we picked out from our earlier research into this was LEAPs have a very, very important role to play in that. So for us, local area energy planning, or LEAPs, is a pioneering planning approach which addresses the whole energy system to deliver that evidence base for change and set out a plan for implementation. So, and that basically would help us to drive coordination of our policies. It would help us to provide confidence. It would also help to provide that evidence with regards to implementation. So with our climate and environment action plan, we included a committed action for LEAPs to be developed in West Yorkshire, and at least one completed by 2024. And the basic idea for this, just as I said earlier, was to inform, shape, and enable the transition to a net zero carbon energy system. So where are we? I would allow Lara and Laura go through this in-depthly. So as of now, we are currently delivering a LEAP in Calderdale. This is supported by the Hub. So we've got 70,000 of support from the Hub through our local capacity support. And through the learnings from the LEAP in Calderdale, through what's happening in Calderdale, we are also looking to develop LEAPs for other parts of West Yorkshire. So the other districts and the other local authorities within West Yorkshire are currently in develop at the moment. So I'll pass on now to Lara, who will talk more about what we're doing within West Yorkshire with regards to developing all the LEAPs in all the other districts, before Laura gives a quick deep dive on Calderdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. So I'm going to have to take my glasses off, so I'm afraid I won't be able to see you, so please excuse me. So at the moment, as Femi mentioned, the Combined Authority is now looking at LEAPs for the whole of the region. So we're going to be procuring for the 4 local authorities, excluding Calderdale. So Laura, of course, will present where they're at with their LEAP. The Calderdale LEAP will be incorporated into the rest of what we're doing for West Yorkshire, and will ensure that everything is aligned. We're planning for a 15-month contract, which should start in January next year. So my first bullet point there is economies of scale and cross-boundary planning. Now, these, of course, are some of the key advantages of procuring for LEAPs at the same time. Other advantages include regional coordination, a stronger position for investment, for example, when it comes to bidding for government funding. And also it helps us when it comes to working with the DNOs, NGN, etc. In terms of additional funding for deployment and delivery, we're currently seeking funding to cover additional activities, so investment and finance, including a business case. So this is to take account of the fact that there's still work to be done to bridge the gap between the LEAPs themselves once they're completed and actual deployment of net zero energy projects. So the focus would be on green investment finance models that encourage investment in the region. Another point we want to address is network governance, taking into account Ofgem's planned reform to introduce regional system planners and a future systems operator. So it's clear through all of this that we need to have a closer working relationship between the local authorities and combined authorities and the DNOs, etc. So to ensure we have long-term, robust network planning, reduce costs for the work undertaken, and hopefully, as Lizzie referred to earlier, shorter timelines when the issue with the queue at national grid level is resolved. So we've greatly appreciated this opportunity to have a phased rollout. It's been very informative for us to participate in Calderdale's steering group, and it's really helped with our planning process for our LEAPs for the other local authorities. So, for example, we can incorporate Calderdale's learnings. We'll have a stronger steering group built on experience, a faster understanding of the LEAP methodology, and also facilitates pre-contract planning. Hopefully I'll get this the right way up and not go backwards. Got backwards. And back. Yes, thank you. So in terms of ongoing work and pre-contract planning, we're now working on a refresh of the carbon emission reduction pathways. So this builds on the original 2019 sets for West Yorkshire. One of the deliverables will a complete pathway, setting targets and developing an evidence base. There'll also be an action plan with a pipeline of investable projects, and the interventions identified at this regional level can then be disaggregated to a local authority level. So this is where the link with the LEAPs lies. We're expecting an interim report to be available early next year. In addition, Femi is leading on our hydrogen use case study. So this looks at deployment in different sectors in West Yorkshire, resulting in an evidence-based policy position. The scope will be transport, domestic heating, and industry. And again, the initial findings should be available early next year. Excuse me. So it's clear with the SERPs that the modelling of both the SERPs and the LEAPs needs to be aligned. So we'll require our contractor to work closely with the SERPs contractor, and likewise with the hydrogen use case study. We need to ensure that's aligned with the LEAPs and that there's a shared understanding of the scope of that work. Finally, on governance and data, when it comes to pre-contract planning, we're already holding preparatory meetings with the LAs and with key stakeholders to plan the LEAP governance and scope of activity. We're also hoping to ensure that data sets and NDAs are in place prior to the start of the contract. So in terms of our work with the local authorities and project governance, we're hoping that each LA will participate in the central steering group with planning and energy expertise. We want each LA to set up their own internal stakeholder group covering departments such as housing, energy and transport. And then each LA should set up their own stakeholder engagement group. It's clear from the experience of other LEAPs and net zero energy projects in general that robust stakeholder engagement is key for ensuring citizens buy-in. And indeed, for us, it's one of the most important steps in developing the LEAPs. So in that vein, as I mentioned, we want the LAs to set up their own stakeholder engagement groups. And this is because they know their audience. We can't begin to second guess who the people at the table should be. So that will be their responsibility. Then in terms of GDPR, it's clear that as well, if that's dealt with at a local authority level, that should facilitate any communication with stakeholders, for example, when we organise different events. And then in terms of data management, again, we're hoping that each LA will deal with the collection of data sets, which we'll then hold centrally at combined authority level, so that once the LEAPs are complete, it will be an easy matter to update all the data sets. Oops. Right. That's me. I'll hand over to Laura.
Hi everyone. So our local area energy plan will offer us a clearer insight into our current energy landscape and help us to understand the next steps of local energy decarbonisation across our borough. Locally in Calderdale, we declared a climate emergency in 2019 with targets to achieve net zero by 2038. We've published our own Calderdale specific emission reduction pathway in 2021, produced by consultant Element Energy, which is a daughter study to the WICA, West Yorkshire Combined Authority Carbon Emission Reduction Pathway. And we've recently finalised our 3-year climate action plan, 23 to 26, which aligns to our ERP study. The Climate Action Plan is led by our Climate Action Partnership, which is a multi-agency committee that has cross-party councillor representation, plus leaders from key stakeholders in our area, such as our largest social housing provider, Together Housing, organisations such as Friends of the Earth, Slow the Flow, the NHS, and lots of other organisations that represent our local area. Developing our LEAP is one of the actions within our Climate Action Plan, and once our LEAP has been developed, it's envisaged that our Climate Action Partnership will take ownership of the decision-making that comes out of our LEAP to help drive forward actions. In Calderdale, we have a relatively small population size, just over 200,000. We're on the Pennines, in between Manchester and Leeds, so lots of hills. And 2/3 of our borough is rural. 32% of our homes are built before 1900s. And as you can see from the picture, there's a lot of pre-1920s solid wall terrace houses in our borough. It's actually 45% of our homes are terraced houses. We have a lot of Grade 2 listed buildings. In our emission reduction pathway, we've modelled our ambitions to retrofit 69,000 dwellings to EPC level C or better. And our LEAP will provide us with a fully costed spatial plan that will show us what measures we can install, where we can install them, and how much it's going to cost us. It will provide us with the detail to develop strategic outline business cases, to scale up our opportunities for investment, to increase that local stakeholder awareness, and to enable and build that shared understanding with our local communities. Our LEAP will help us to inform, shape, and identify options, preferences, and priorities for the scale of change that's needed and action that's required. So just a quick summary of our project. Timescale is 12 months. We started in February. We're due to end at the end of the financial year. It's probably going to be March 24 before we finish. We're working with consultants, Integrated Environmental Solutions, and we were one of the first local authorities to follow the newly released Energy System Catapult Guidance on LEAPs, which was published in 21, was it, I think? We're producing a cloud-based digital twin model with tailored dashboards, and that's a 3D map of the entire borough and every building within it. We've used lots of local and national data inputs and spatial mapping, and we're starting to model different scenarios now. And we have stakeholder engagement running through our project. We really want to bring our communities with us on our journey to net zero. And at the end of it, we'll be looking to develop 2 large business cases for priority projects to HM Treasury Green Book guidance. Within our LEAP, we're looking at all your low and zero carbon heat and power generation, including district heating, heat zoning, renewables, battery storage, heat pumps. We're looking at electricity and heat demand in buildings, so that's all your energy efficiency and insulation measures, your retrofit measures, fabric improvements. We're looking at EV charging and its expected demand, including the impacts on electricity distribution system in the local area, but we're not Modelling mass transport. We're just looking at the EV side of that. And also, as you would likely assume, we're looking at all the distributed networks, including electricity, gas and heat. With hydrogen in our project, we're looking at hydrogen for high value applications. So perhaps where business clusters are that have high process temperatures, but also for things like HGVs and you know, areas where we can container in sort of a hydrogen for high value applications. Things like peaking might also come in there for district heating. Sorry, I haven't clicked it on. Text, not my strong point, I'll tell you that now. I'm with Lizzie on this. So here is an example of loft insulation in one of our towns, Hipperholm. Our digital twin model uses a range of data to give us best estimate of how much energy buildings are using. The model is accurate to within 5% in domestic properties and 10% in non-domestic buildings. It gives us a household level of picture of energy-related metrics and costs, from insulation levels to heating use and carbon emissions from energy. And it gives us an incredible opportunity to target both funds and wider resources, both in and outside of the council, to support the decarbonisation of our buildings. As well as energy, it'll look at things like fuel poverty, air quality, health impacts in relation to decarbonisation. And we think it's got a huge potential to inform and influence other work across the council in our communities, including active projects that we've got, such as Better Homes Yorkshire, which is looking to provide insulation and boiler replacements, plans for electric vehicle charge points, which our transportation services and teams are delivering, as well as a new Innovate UK funded project, Fast Followers programme, which is looking at non-technical barriers, particularly with our solid wall properties, pre-1920s properties. In future, it will be our climate action partnership that will be really sort of taking ownership of our leap, and council departments and wider stakeholders are involved to support our net zero ambitions. And I'm just going to go through a few of the sort of images that we've got so far. Bear with me with the tech. So this is in Halifax. You can see the heating energy. You can see how much kilowatt hours per metre squared for every individual property on a sliding scale. Here you can see fuel poverty risks in evidence, so we can look at the probability of fuel poverty in there. We've modelled conservation areas, the restrictions around insulation on some of our solid wall properties in conservation areas means that we can't do certain things in those areas, so it's really useful to understand where we can do measures and where we have barriers. And we've also modelled, I think there's one more, might have skipped it, we've also modelled eco-funding, so that's another one that we've started funding. To verify a model, we've completed checks using local and regional data. We've put in data from non-domestic and the data from our domestic buildings comes from the Energy Saving Trust, from the Home Analytics data, so it incorporates all the energy performance certificate data, and where there's gaps, the Energy Saving Trust have got their own algorithms to fill in the gaps. So the domestic data is actually quite comprehensive for our model, but the business data and the data on our commercial buildings is a lot more patchy. And it's quite difficult in our model to identify those high energy users have industrial processes. So, because the modelling that we've done so far mainly accounts for space heating hot water rather than process heat. We've also been engaging with a whole range of different organisations, having one-to-one meetings with people, the NHS, Lloyds, who have a large banking building in our area, as well as some of those high industrial organisations that to help sort of verify and check our model. Wider stakeholder engagement, as I said, it's a core part of our project to gain buy-in and understanding, and that shared understanding of our local area energy plan, to demonstrate that it really has been shaped by the perspective of a decent range of relevant local stakeholders. Northern Power Grid are part of our steering group, and Northern Gas Networks also get copied into all the information, so there we've met with both of those. And Yorkshire Water as well. We've been looking at wastewater treatment plants and waste heat coming from some of the wastewater treatment plants that Yorkshire Water run. And really to get that buy-in, that understanding, to share the information, to get an understanding of what the local intent is. We've been holding a range of stakeholder engagement workshops with different sectors, really to understand what the detail are, what the barriers are, what the constraints are, and that will feed back into the phasing of our modelling work to help us understand when, what is the local intent, when are these measures actually likely to happen, not what's possible, but what's actually likely to happen, and what's the intent from the local stakeholders. Sorry, I've not clicked the thing on, clicked it on here. So far, we've completed simulations with the following interventions to apply to appropriate domestic buildings. So we have light retrofit, including cavity wall insulation, full loft insulation, loft up, and room-in-room insulation. And we have deep retrofit, so measures that are more disruptive to install, including double glazing upgrades from single glazing, suspended floor insulation, solid wall insulation. And simulations have been run to identify the number of individual retrofit measures installed in each scenario, whether that's light or deep retrofit. And we're now starting to see those high-level projections coming through in terms of numbers. And no, it's unrealistic to assume that all homes requiring retrofit will have all applicable measures installed. So the results at the moment, they show the maximum possible reduction that could be achieved rather than what will likely be achieved. And the outputs from our own stakeholder engagement workshops and techno-economic analysis that we'll be doing in a couple of months, that will determine the likely rates of uptake for each measure, which will be used in our final LEAP. The digital twin model has been re-simulated with all fossil fuel boilers, and domestic buildings having been replaced with electric heating technologies, primarily air source heat pumps. And there's a graph showing light versus deep retrofit, including the boiler simulations, and we've got our baseline numbers, fabric retrofit numbers, numbers where our heat is fully electrified, and then the lower numbers, that's where we need to get to. That's once the grid has also decarbonised. So that's how far we can go with that. And Total area of PV panels was determined from roof orientation and building geometry data from the home analytics data sets, and annual electricity generation and carbon emission reductions were obtained by simulating solar panels in IES software using local weather files. And that's kind of where we are. We're at the stage now where we're still in the modelling phase, where the next steps of modelling we're looking at is heat, electrification, solar assessment for our non-domestic buildings. We're starting to add in all the network data that Lizzie's kindly provided to us from Northern Power Grid into our digital twin model to see where the heat electrification as well as the likely EV uptake may cause grid constraints and require infrastructure upgrades. And we have started our assessment of land use and restrictions to identify sites. These aren't the buildings, these are the wider rural areas mainly, but assessment of land use to identify sites where large-scale wind or solar could be installed. And we're undertaking simulations to determine potential energy generation and carbon emission reductions from that. And we're also doing an assessment of any sites or areas where district heating may be viable, or the most suitable sites will be simulated in software, in the digital twin software. So recently, 2 weeks ago, we found out that early stage plans and a scoping report has been submitted to our council for a major 302 megawatt onshore wind farm. So commercial development, they're looking to use private land to put up to 65 wind turbines. It could be one of the biggest wind farms in England if proposals get accepted. It's looking to include 150 megawatts of battery storage and a £75 million community benefit fund, which they are looking to distribute to local people who are in a specific postcode area that have sight and visibility of the area where the wind turbines are going to be put. And it would be, they're looking to give out £2.5 million to people who are in fuel poverty to help them. It's very, very, very early stages. The proposal has just been submitted. We're still working on how that will be checked, whether it will go through planning or whether it will go through a different route. And within our local area energy plan, we're now trying to work out how we might take into account of that within our modelling and plan as well. Which brings up a point that people said earlier about what do we do when policy changes? What do we do when they move the regulations back 5 years for domestic boilers and for EV charging? How do we take account of that within our model? And I'd be really interested in anyone's thoughts on that. As I said, we are looking to develop 2 business cases that will come out of the end of the project. And the LEAP digital twin model, you saw a few slides showing snapshots of it, but it is a dynamic model. It will be ours. We will have the ownership of it. And we're still trying to work out the use of the LEAP digital twin model in terms of whether we need a license, who will let use it. Obviously, there's a lot of important data in there, and we don't want cowboys just to be coming along and using that to sell their products to local people. But we do want to be able to share it. We want all our partnership, our stakeholders, other departments within the council to be able to use that data to influence their projects that they're working on. But it is a council asset. We will own it once the project's complete, and we will be able to update it, use it to keep track of improvements. And that's it.